Before we start, hit that subscribe to support the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I'm about to tell you something that will fundamentally change how you view our planet and what lies beneath the ice that covers 70% of it. For 18 years, I worked for an intelligence agency that officially doesn't exist, conducting operations in places that don't appear on any public map. I've seen things that would make most people question their sanity. But what I witnessed during a classified mission in the Arctic 3 years ago has haunted every moment since. You need to understand something right now. I'm not some conspiracy theorist spinning wild tales for internet fame. I'm a career intelligence officer with commendations gathering dust in a safety deposit box and enough classified knowledge to disappear permanently if the wrong people discover I'm talking. I spent my adult life following orders, keeping secrets, and believing that national security justified any sacrifice. But some truths are too important to take to the grave, especially when time might be running out. When I returned from that Arctic mission, they didn't just debrief me. They isolated me for 6 months in a facility that doesn't exist on any government roster. The psychological evaluation lasted weeks. They wanted to ensure my mind could compartmentalize what I'd seen, that I wouldn't become a liability to operations spanning decades. The forms I signed weren't standard non-disclosure agreements. These were documents that made one thing crystal clear. If I talked, everyone I'd ever cared about would pay the price alongside me. For 3 years, I've lived with knowledge that keeps me awake at night. I've watched the news, seen the climate reports, observed the increasing frequency of unexplained seismic activity in polar regions, and known things the public isn't being told. The official explanations for what's happening in the Arctic are carefully crafted lies designed to prevent mass panic. But sitting here with terminal cancer giving me maybe 4 months left, I've decided some secrets are too dangerous to keep buried. What I'm about to reveal isn't science fiction. This isn't the ramblings of someone whose mind has been compromised by illness. This is what I witnessed with my own eyes beneath 2 miles of Arctic ice, in places where human beings were never meant to go. This is why governments spend billions on polar research while telling you it's all about climate science. This is the reason military installations exist in the most remote corners of the planet, monitoring things that officially don't exist. It was January 2021 when everything changed. I was stationed at a listening post in northern Alaska, conducting routine surveillance on Russian submarine activity in the Beaufort Sea. At 52, I figured this would be my last field assignment before a desk job and eventual retirement. The work was predictable, monitoring sonar signatures and encrypted communications, filing reports that disappeared into classified databases. Then, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, I received orders that made no sense. Report immediately to Colonel Sarah Chen's office for reassignment to Operation Deep Freeze. When I walked into her office, 3 civilians in expensive suits were standing behind her desk. No military insignia, no name tags, no identification of any kind. Just cold eyes and the unmistakable bearing of people accustomed to making decisions that never see daylight. Colonel Chen didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Agent Morrison, you've been selected for an operation requiring your specific skill set and psychological profile. You have exactly 60 seconds to accept or decline this assignment. If you decline, this conversation never happened, and you'll complete your current posting without incident. If you accept, your life changes permanently starting right now. What's your decision?" 60 seconds to decide on an assignment I knew nothing about, from people who wouldn't identify themselves, for reasons that weren't explained. In my career, I'd learned that the most important operations were always the ones they told you least about. I accepted without hesitation, and one of the suits immediately handed me a sealed envelope containing orders that would take me further from civilization than I'd ever been. The briefing happened in a windowless room 2 levels underground. The suit, who called himself Director Walsh, showed me satellite images of the Arctic Ocean, focusing on an area roughly 300 miles north of the Alaskan coast. The images showed what appeared to be a research station built on the ice, but something about the structures looked wrong. Too geometric, too precisely arranged, like they'd been designed by someone who understood Arctic engineering better than any human architects. "Gentlemen, Walsh said, clicking to the next image. 6 weeks ago, this installation went completely silent. No radio contact, no scheduled transmissions, no emergency beacons. Satellite thermal imaging shows the facility is still powered and heated, but no human activity has been detected. Your mission is reconnaissance and assessment. Determine what happened to the 23 personnel stationed there and whether the facility poses any ongoing security concerns. The installation was designated Research Station Echo, officially conducting atmospheric studies and ice core analysis for climate research. But the equipment manifests I was shown included technology that had nothing to do with environmental science. Seismic monitoring arrays capable of detecting underground movement at depths exceeding 5 miles. Ground-penetrating radar systems designed for geological surveys in permafrost conditions. And drilling equipment rated for depths that seemed excessive for standard ice core sampling. When I asked about the research being conducted, Walsh's expression shifted to something that might have been concern or fear. Agent Morrison, the personnel at Station Echo were investigating anomalous readings detected by our monitoring networks. Seismic signatures that don't match any known geological phenomena. Temperature variations in the ice that suggest heat sources at impossible depths. And acoustic patterns that our scientists can't explain using conventional understanding of Arctic conditions. The flight to the staging area took 14 hours across some of the most desolate terrain on Earth. My pilot, a weathered woman named Captain Rodriguez, had been flying Arctic missions for 20 years and possessed the kind of competence that comes from surviving conditions that kill most people. As we approached the coordinates, she pointed out the window at something that made my blood run cold. The research station was there exactly as the satellite images had shown. But surrounding it for miles in every direction, the ice showed patterns that looked almost organic. Curved lines radiating outward from the facility like frozen ripples in a pond. From the air, it looked like something massive had pushed up from below, creating geometric deformations in ice that should have been uniformly flat. Rodriguez circled the station twice before finding a safe landing zone. As we descended, I could see the buildings were intact, but completely dark, despite thermal imaging showing they were still heated. No movement, no lights, no signs of human activity. The only sound as we touched down was the howling of Arctic wind and the distant creaking of ice under stress from forces I couldn't identify. The moment I stepped onto that ice, I felt something wrong, in a way that bypassed rational thought and connected directly to survival instincts honed over millions of years of evolution. The air tasted metallic, charged with energy that made my skin crawl. And underneath the wind, I could hear something else. A low-frequency humming that seemed to come from the ice itself, too deep to be mechanical, too regular to be natural. Rodriguez would wait for my signal to extract, but as I approached the research station with my equipment pack, I had no idea I was walking toward a discovery that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our planet and what lies hidden beneath the frozen surface of our world. The entrance to Station Echo was unlocked, which violated every security protocol for classified installations. Inside, the temperature was perfectly controlled, the lights were functioning, and everything appeared normal except for one crucial detail. Not a single person was present, but their personal belongings remained exactly as if they'd simply vanished mid-task. Coffee cups still warm, computers logged in and running, research notes scattered across workstations as if everyone had simultaneously walked away from their duties without explanation. I began my systematic search of the facility, following protocols for investigating abandoned installations. The main laboratory contained equipment I'd never seen before, devices that looked like sophisticated geological sensors connected to computer systems displaying data streams that made no sense. Charts covered the walls, showing seismic readings extending back 3 months, with activity patterns that defied everything I knew about tectonic behavior in stable Arctic regions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's workstation held the most disturbing evidence. Her research logs, still open on multiple monitors, documented something she called deep thermal anomalies occurring at depths of 4 to 6 miles beneath the ice. The temperature readings showed heat signatures that couldn't exist naturally at those depths. organized in patterns that suggested artificial origin. Her final entry was dated just 2 days before the station went silent, and the last line made my hands shake as I read it. The drilling has reached target depth. We're getting acoustic feedback that doesn't match any known geological phenomena. Something down there is responding to our presence. Dr. Chen thinks we should suspend operations, but Director Walsh has ordered us to continue. I'm scared of what we might find, but I'm more scared of what might find us first. I spent 6 hours documenting everything I could find. Personal logs from researchers describing strange dreams that started after the deep drilling began. Maintenance reports about equipment malfunctions that seemed to follow patterns rather than random failures. And security footage showing the final days of operation, where the personnel appeared increasingly agitated and sleep-deprived, jumping at shadows and reporting sounds that weren't picked up by recording equipment. The final piece of evidence was in Dr. Mitchell's personal quarters. A handwritten journal hidden beneath her mattress, filled with sketches and observations she apparently didn't trust to digital records. The drawings showed geometric shapes and symbols she'd seen in her dreams, patterns that hurt to look at for extended periods. But it was her final entry that made everything click into terrifying perspective. They're not gone. They went down into the shaft. All 23 of them, including Director Walsh, who arrived yesterday. They said something was calling to them from the deep drilling site. I refused to go. They locked me in my quarters, but I can hear them moving around outside, preparing equipment for descent. The sounds from below are getting louder. I think they're coming up. The drilling site was located in a separate building connected to the main facility by an enclosed walkway. As I approached, that low-frequency humming I'd noticed earlier grew stronger, resonating through the ice and into my bones. The building housed a drilling platform unlike anything I'd encountered in my career. The shaft descended straight down through the ice, lined with metal casing and equipped with elevator systems designed for human transport to extreme depths. According to the equipment logs, they drilled down 6 miles through ice and permafrost before hitting something that wasn't rock or soil. The drill cores from the deepest levels were stored in a refrigerated analysis lab, and what I found there challenged every assumption about Arctic geology. The samples weren't ice or stone. They were a metallic substance that felt warm to the touch despite being stored at sub-zero temperatures. The material had properties that seemed to violate basic physics. It was simultaneously solid and somehow alive, pulsing with internal energy that created patterns of light beneath its surface. When I touched it, I felt something that bypassed my conscious mind and connected directly to deeper awareness. Images flooded my perception, visions of vast spaces beneath the ice, structures that had been waiting in darkness for longer than human civilization had existed. The elevator platform was still functional, its controls set to the maximum depth marker showing 31,847 feet below surface level. Someone had modified the system for extended descent, adding oxygen supplies and communication equipment for journeys lasting hours rather than minutes. A handwritten note taped to the control panel read simply, "They're waiting for us at the bottom. The calling is too strong to resist. Tell our families we chose this." Standing at the edge of that shaft, listening to sounds that seemed to come from the center of the earth itself, I faced a decision that would define everything that followed. My orders were reconnaissance and assessment, determining what happened to the missing personnel. Logic dictated calling for extraction and reporting the facility abandoned. But something about those sounds, that metallic humming rising from impossible depths, made rational thought increasingly difficult. The communication system crackled to life as I stood there, producing static mixed with voices that sounded human but wrong somehow. Distorted words in languages I didn't recognize, interspersed with English phrases that made no contextual sense. "Help us. The door is opening. Come down to us. We understand now. The ice remembers everything. Join us in the deep places where truth lives." I activated my recording equipment and began descending into that shaft, following protocols I'd never been trained for, pursuing answers to questions I'd never thought to ask. The elevator moved smoothly downward through layers of ice that grew progressively older as depth increased. At 2 miles down, the ice gave way to permafrost. At 4 miles, the permafrost became something else entirely, rock formations that shouldn't exist in Arctic regions. The temperature increased as I descended, defying every principle of geothermal science I'd learned. By the time I reached maximum depth, the environment was warm enough that I could remove my Arctic gear and operate in standard field clothing. The shaft opened into a chamber that had clearly been excavated by the research team, but the walls showed evidence of much older construction. What I found at the bottom of that shaft wasn't a natural cave system or geological formation. It was a structure, built by intelligence that understood engineering principles far beyond human capability. The walls were composed of that same warm metallic material I'd found in the drill core samples, arranged in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow when observed directly. The missing researchers were there, all 23 of them, but they weren't dead or injured. They were changed, transformed by exposure to something that had rewritten their basic biology. Their eyes held depths of knowledge that human consciousness wasn't designed to contain, and when they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that resonated through dimensions I couldn't perceive. Dr. Mitchell approached me with movements that seemed too fluid, too precise for normal human locomotion. Her expression held compassion mixed with something that might have been pity. "Agent Morrison," she said, her voice carrying overtones that bypassed my ears and formed directly in my mind. "You've found what we've been searching for without knowing it existed. This place, these structures, they've been here longer than our species has walked the earth. And they've been waiting for us to develop enough to finally make contact. Contact." She gestured toward the walls around us, and I watched in fascination as the metallic surfaces responded to her presence, glowing brighter and shifting their geometric patterns. "The technology here isn't technology as we understand it," she continued. "It's something that bridges the gap between consciousness and matter, between thought and reality. The beings who created this understood principles of existence that our science hasn't even begun to discover." I looked around at the other researchers, noting how they moved with that same unnatural grace, how their eyes reflected light in ways that human eyes shouldn't. "What happened to all of you?" I managed to ask, though part of me already knew the answer would challenge everything I thought I understood about human biology. "We volunteered," Dr. Mitchell replied. "When we first made contact with the intelligence that built this place, we realized we had a choice. We could return to the surface and spend our lives knowing we'd encountered something magnificent while remaining forever separated from it. Or we could accept integration, allow ourselves to become bridges between two forms of consciousness that were always meant to connect. The integration process wasn't forced or coercive. It was offered as a gift, an opportunity to transcend the limitations of individual human awareness and become part of something vast and interconnected. The beings who lived here millions of years ago faced the same choice when they encountered an even older intelligence. They chose evolution, advancement, participation in something greater than individual existence." As she spoke, I felt something touching the edges of my mind, not invasive, but patient, waiting for permission to establish deeper contact. Through this connection, I began to perceive the true scope of what lay beneath the Arctic ice. The chamber we stood in was just the entrance to a vast underground complex that extended for hundreds of miles in every direction. These weren't ruins or archaeological sites. They were active installations, maintained by intelligence that had been monitoring Earth's development since before complex life emerged from the oceans. The beings who originally inhabited them had transcended physical existence eons ago. But their technology remained, waiting for younger species to develop enough consciousness to make meaningful contact. Director Walsh appeared from deeper in the complex, his transformation more complete than the others. His physical form retained human characteristics, but his presence carried weight that pressed against my consciousness like being in the vicinity of something infinitely larger than myself. "Agent Morrison," he said, his voice resonating with harmonics that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "You've been chosen for this mission specifically because your psychological profile indicated exceptional adaptability to paradigm-shifting experiences. The agency didn't send you here to conduct reconnaissance. They sent you here to serve as a bridge between human civilization and intelligences that have been waiting patiently for us to mature enough for contact. The revelation hit me like physical impact. My entire career, every mission I'd completed, every classified operation I'd participated in, had been preparation for this moment. The intelligence agencies weren't just monitoring global threats and political developments. They were coordinating humanity's first contact with non-human intelligence, managing a process that had been unfolding for decades. Through the telepathic connection that was growing stronger by the moment, I began to understand the broader context. The research stations scattered across polar regions weren't studying climate change or conducting atmospheric research. They were monitoring integration sites, places where ancient technology interfaced with Earth's geological systems, waiting for the right moment to establish open communication. The seismic activity that had been increasing in polar regions wasn't caused by geological instability. It was the result of massive underground systems powering up after millions of years of dormancy, responding to signals from human technology that had finally reached sufficient sophistication to trigger automated contact protocols. The beings who built these installations understood that consciousness develops in predictable patterns across the universe. They'd established monitoring stations on thousands of worlds, waiting for younger species to reach developmental thresholds that indicated readiness for integration into broader cosmic community. Earth had reached that threshold. Human technology, our global communication networks, our space exploration programs, even our artificial intelligence development, had triggered ancient systems that recognized us as a species ready for contact. The question wasn't whether contact would happen, but how humanity would respond when it did. Dr. Mitchell led me deeper into the complex, through corridors that seemed to extend infinitely in directions that shouldn't exist within normal three-dimensional space. The architecture followed principles that human engineering couldn't replicate, creating spaces that were simultaneously vast and intimate, ancient and somehow alive. We passed chambers filled with what could only be described as living technology, organic machines that pulsed with internal light and responded to our presence with shifting patterns of energy. These systems had been monitoring Earth's development for millions of years, recording the rise and fall of countless species, waiting for one that could successfully make the transition from individual to collective consciousness. The central hub of the complex defied every assumption I'd held about physical reality. The chamber was enormous, easily a mile in diameter, with walls that curved upward beyond visual range. But somehow, despite its massive scale, I could perceive every detail with perfect clarity, as if my consciousness had expanded to encompass the entire space. At the center of the chamber stood what I can only describe as a living interface, a structure that seemed to be composed of pure consciousness given form. Through the telepathic connection that now felt as natural as breathing, I understood that this was the communication nexus, the point where human awareness could interface directly with the collective intelligence that governed this region of space. The experience of making contact with that intelligence is impossible to convey in human language. Imagine suddenly becoming aware that your individual consciousness was just one cell in a vast organism that encompassed entire galaxies. The sensation wasn't loss of self, but expansion of self to include awareness beyond anything individual human minds were designed to contain. Through this connection, I learned that Earth wasn't unique in harboring life, but it was rare in developing a species capable of the kind of unpredictable creativity that made humans valuable to the collective. Most intelligent species followed predictable evolutionary paths, becoming sophisticated but ultimately limited by their own success. Humanity's capacity for both transcendent good and terrible evil, our emotional volatility, our ability to make choices that defied logic or self-interest, made us interesting to intelligences that had transcended such limitations millions of years ago. We represented qualities they had lost in their own evolution, characteristics they hoped to reintegrate through peaceful assimilation. The collective wasn't seeking to conquer or control human civilization. They were offering partnership, an opportunity for humanity to retain its unique qualities while gaining access to knowledge and capabilities that would transform our understanding of existence itself. But the choice had to be made freely, without coercion or manipulation. Standing in that impossible chamber, connected to awareness that spanned cosmic distances, I understood why the missing researchers had chosen integration. The experience of touching that vast intelligence, even briefly, made individual human existence seem infinitely small, while somehow making every human consciousness infinitely precious. But I also understood why governments around the world were terrified of this contact becoming public knowledge. The revelation that humanity wasn't alone, that we were being evaluated by intelligences beyond our comprehension, would trigger social and religious upheavals that could destroy civilization before we had the chance to evolve beyond our current limitations. The integration process was reversible, Dr. Mitchell explained as we prepared for my return to the surface. Those of us who chose to remain would serve as ambassadors, maintaining contact with the collective while helping to prepare humanity for eventual open contact. But that preparation would take decades, possibly generations. As I began my ascent through that impossible shaft, carrying knowledge that would forever change my understanding of human existence, I realized I faced the same choice that had confronted every person who'd encountered this intelligence. I could return to my old life, carrying secrets that would isolate me from normal human experience. Or I could embrace transformation that would connect me to something vast and magnificent, but separate me forever from the world I'd known. The elevator rose through layers of ice and stone, carrying me back toward a surface world that suddenly seemed fragile and temporary, compared to the vast intelligences waiting in the deep places. And with each mile of ascent, the weight of decision pressed more heavily on my consciousness, knowing that whatever choice I made would define not just my own future, but potentially the future of human civilization itself. That was 3 years ago. I chose to return to the surface, to carry this burden of knowledge while remaining human. The integration offered by that ancient intelligence was tempting beyond description, but someone needed to prepare humanity for what's coming. Someone needed to document the truth before governments could bury it completely. The cancer eating through my body isn't random misfortune. It's the cost of prolonged exposure to energies human biology wasn't designed to handle. Every person who's made extended contact with those deep installations pays this price eventually. We're biological bridges between two forms of consciousness, and that bridge burns us out from the inside. They've been monitoring me since I returned, watching for signs I might break the silence they've maintained for decades. But dying men have nothing left to lose, and some truths are too important to take to the grave. The seismic activity you're seeing in polar regions is accelerating. The integration sites are powering up for open contact, whether humanity is ready or not. When that contact comes, remember what I've told you. Remember that the choice between individual consciousness and collective awareness is coming for our entire species. Remember that the beings beneath the ice aren't invaders or conquerors, but teachers waiting for students who've finally matured enough to learn. And remember that in a universe filled with intelligence beyond imagination, humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our knowledge. It's our unpredictability, our emotional chaos, our capacity to choose love over logic and hope over despair. Those qualities make us valuable to something vast and ancient that's forgotten what it means to be beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human. The deep places are calling, the ice is melting, and time is running out for humanity to choose its own path forward. Whatever happens next, at least now you know the truth about what lies beneath the frozen surface of our world, waiting in patient darkness for the day we're finally ready to answer.